Hello and welcome back to Teppou Republic. On the last episode we saw the Sioux forces split up. One force moved south towards Kawachi to challenge the Sayama clan. The other force, led by daimyo Takayuki, stayed in the newly acquired Umi province to fight an Obama invasion. We challenged them to battle. The enemy had artillery advantage. I tried to negate it with cavalry and failed. In the end, I managed to suppress the enemy by using massed fire from tons of matchlock militants to defeat their front lines, and eventually I got them all caught up in melee and smashed them from behind with cavalry and my numerically superior spear levy, defeating the Obama invasion entirely. Then the Sayama rallied out of Kawachi to attack our separate force led by Takahisa. He used effective rear charges with cavalry to annihilate the enemy in a bloody melee. Now let's continue. Okay, first I need you to tell him that I don't have the faintest clue what he is saying.
こいつはあなたをわかりませんよと言います。
Right, now I'll give you the details and you can relay them as needed. All the pieces are military surplus, unused but for a few testing rounds. You'll want to instruct your operators to be extremely careful setting the fuses on the shells. This is where all the rookies go wrong. You have to light it right at the end. If you light it further down, it's liable to explode in your hands. Bang! I think he knows what I mean there. Anyway, I'm sure you'll work it out. There's more if you have the currency for it. Won't take me long to return with another shipment. You might well consider it. These pieces are very effective used correctly. An experienced crew on these little monsters can ruin an army, be it attacking or defending. The buggers at Sevastopol had a whole regiment of them, just sat in their walls and blasted us. Very, very dangerous stuff. Welcome back to Teppou Republic. These are the battle results from the Sayama sally against our besieging forces. You can see they're very good. We lost just a couple of hundred and defeated over 1,300. We also captured 2 regiments of wooden cannons. Whether they'll be useful is unclear. The good news is that we're being reinforced by our allies in the siege, which means we now have an absolutely overwhelming advantage at Kawachi, as you can see here from the balance bar. Our allies have brought a fairly modern army. It's quite interesting. Our allies seem to have modernized much better than we have. Anyway, we're going to go into auto-resolve and capture the castle from the last few remaining levied infantry. Defending it, those wooden cannons we captured will give us a definitive advantage in that auto-resolve as well. Our ally leveled up, so I guess that's good news unless he decides to turn on us. So Kawachi is ours. It's still a bit off on a limb because we don't have military access to get back to Umi and Iga, which means Takahisa's forces in Kawachi are isolated. So I need to make Kawachi somewhat of a stronghold since it's not properly attached to the rest of my domain. It needs to be able to defend itself without relying on support from nearby provinces. Now the next thing I'm concerned about are the Nagoya clan, who have captured Mino from one of my allies and could potentially now advance west towards Umi, and in fact their army has stationed itself on the west side of Mino as if it was planning to move out in our direction. They were refusing peace with me when I offered it, so it seems they do intend to resume hostilities. So it seems Umi is going to be the site of that battle, but before that Umi is still under threat from these roaming Obama survivors who I need to take out. So I'm getting together a small force, combining troops from both Iga and Umi province. Takayuki is going to lead the attack, the enemy retreat, which I guess is what I expected. Now, to defeat them, I actually have to chase them down. The problem is I don't want to move loads of troops away from Umi Castle because the Obama and the Nagoya could attack at any moment. So I need to decide what to do about this. I decided I'll send just a very small amount of forces back to Umi for now, because both the Obama and the Nagoya are far enough away from Umi that I don't think they can attack this turn. It's probably going to take them at least one turn to get to a point when they could attack us in the next turn. So for now I can afford to have this relatively powerful part of my force chasing the Obama. The guys who came up from Iga, I'm going to use them to support Umi Castle in the future as well. So in the end turn sequence, the Obama indeed start marching towards Umi. It's going to take them 1 to 2 turns though to actually reach the castle. The question is, will the Nagoya clan also attack? They're towards the end of the end turn sequence. Our allies are leaving us in Kawachi and going back to defend Yamato, so a good move from them. The Nagoya indeed go for Umi. They can't reach the castle as I'd hoped, which means a battle is now going to be imminent in the next turn. I need to collect as many forces together as I can and see what we can do about this army. They've also sent one of their shinobi to hang around outside the castle, so I potentially can deal with him using my own shinobi who's inside the castle at the moment, doing a spy network. Let's have a look at their force. From what we can tell, it has a number of modern units. Some of them are only reservists rather than proper units, but their reservists are still better than our levies. They're still 1 step higher in terms of how much training and experience they have. The good news for us is that I finished recruiting some 4-inch mortars, a Western style unit that I can import because I've researched an art called Arms Deals, which allows you to get Western weaponry. I'm going to annihilate these Obama survivors very quickly with these 2 units I'm sending after them, since I had to send Takayuki back to defend the castle against this attack. They easily cut down those enemies, so the Obama threat to the west of Umi has been satisfied for now. Yeah, so those cannons that I've got through the arms deal are a unit I can only construct because I have a cannon range here in Umi. They're very expensive and hopefully very powerful. I'm hoping they'll be able to do some damage once it comes to fighting. So I'm going to try and get rid of the enemy's agent using my own. I managed to wound him, which means for a couple of turns they won't be able to do any actions against me. So that's good news at least. It also means my ninja will be getting some experience. So I decided the best thing to do would be to simply attack this invading army, because if I let them walk around, they'll probably destroy all the infrastructure, and I definitely don't have enough money to deal with that sort of situation. We have a giant numerical advantage, but the balance bar isn't very far in our favour because the enemy's units are simply more powerful. They have saber cavalry upgraded, some upgraded infantry, including line infantry, who will far outclass our own ranged infantry. So let's see how this goes. When the rifle falls into the wrong hands, it is a dangerous thing. This day we face enemies who believe that the Western powers who invented these devices for causing death are actually a force for good in this world. They follow their blinkered Shogun into a battle against our grand host, knowing not that these lands have already abandoned the false leader. And what is more, they forget that of all the men in Japan, it is only the men of Su who had the wits to learn of Western tricks before this war began. Hence we shall show them that it is not the rifle that wins wars, but the cannon. From the very beginning of the battle, my wooden cannons are able to fire into the enemy's position. This means that even though I am the offensive side, the enemy has a severe range disadvantage whilst it stays on the other side of the battlefield. The AI knows this, so it's going to try and close the distance with me as soon as I can. My cannon fire is super inaccurate. I did manage to get a really good hit on one of the enemy's regiments of cavalry, but for the most part those wooden cannons aren't going to be doing very much. So seeing that the enemy were advancing, I decided to prepare a position in front of my static artillery, which I had deployed as far forward as possible in the hope that it will be able to hit as many enemies far away as possible. So now I'm going to defend in front of them so that once the enemy are locked in place fighting my main lines, my artillery can still fire over the top and hit more enemy units as the battle goes on. You can see I've managed to take out a couple of the enemy's infantry units. They're leading with their samurai and all of their ranged ones are behind, so it seems they're planning to sacrifice their traditional units in the first charge and then let their true units go into battle afterwards. Now as they approach, they come into range of my mortars, which have a shorter range than cannons, but these mortars are much more effective in that their shots are explosive rather than just kinetic, which means as they come down they explode, hitting the enemy with shrapnel. The problem with this is that the crew have to set the fuses to exactly the right length, and if they don't, they explode before they hit the target, which means they don't actually do any damage. So this severely limits the damage I can do with these mortars. You can see most of the shots are exploding in the air above the ground, but the ones that do hit are causing devastating damage. So I'm going to hope that my mortars can inflict heavy casualties on the enemy before the fighting really starts, because they do have the advantage in terms of ranged infantry. I've got my cavalry sat off on a flank there, so once the enemy are locked in place, I can go behind them and start sneaking around with my cavalry to do some damage. To begin with, they're engaging with their Yarikachi on the front line, engaging with them alone, which means I can sneak forward my matchlock militants to get many different units firing at those matchlock kachi at once to gradually defeat them. Meanwhile, whilst they're all just standing here, I'm targeting their yari kachi with my mortars in an attempt to take out their elite melee units, because I have a big melee advantage over the enemy, so I want to press that home if I can. So a little bit later, you can see the matchlock kachi have been quite severely depleted by the constant fire from my matchlock militants. The yari kachi have also lost almost half their men from the sustained mortar fire over the period of a few minutes, and they decide to rout. You can see a huge pile of bodies they're leaving behind. At the same time, the enemy's matchlock militants rout because they too are suffering heavy casualties. Some of the enemy's line infantry are already in range of my men and are starting to fire. I can't fire back because line infantry outrange my matchlocks by quite a large margin. So what I'm going to do instead is just let them keep firing at me and move my men back a bit to minimize my actual casualties. I want to basically buy as much time as I can to keep firing my mortars and cannons, to take out as many of the enemy's elite ranged infantry as I can before a proper ranged battle begins, because that's the only hope I'm going to have. Although of course I do have the cavalry advantage in this battle as well. My cavalry have snuck round to the enemy's flank and are now right next to them. I get some nice hits with the mortars that devastate some of their infantry and their samurai at the same time. And with this, they decide to begin a general advance. It seems they got bored of taking my artillery bombardment and are going to begin the actual battle. You can just about see more mortar shells flying down. The ones that hit are doing devastating damage to the enemy's lines, breaking up their formation, and that will be very severely damaging their morale. Now, as the firing begins, I decided I need to basically distract the enemy and stop them from firing at me as much as I can. So I'm bringing out my cavalry into the engagement. They start turning their units to engage my cavalry, and I'm going to slam into melee and try and lock them up, because my men will gradually win out in melee even though the enemy do have bayonets. Their saber cavalry had charged my line, but I managed to hit them in the rear with my own cavalry and then stop them in the front with my spear levy. Their general's heavy cavalry was doing a similar thing all along the line, but I'd rushed forward spear levy to lock them down and gradually defeat them. The one place where that didn't work is out here on my extreme right, where some of the enemy's saber cavalry engaged my levy infantry and did some heavy damage, but I managed to get some spear levies in there as well, so that fight will eventually turn in my favour. Here in the centre, you can see I've got some matchlock militants actually attempting to fight with the enemy's heavy cavalry, and that's going extremely poorly. Luckily I had spear levy nearby to charge in at the same time. Here you can see the enemy's generals are getting eaten up. Now my cavalry fighting the enemy's infantry at the back, I decided to get them out, because they were starting to suffer heavy losses against the enemy's bayonet-armed troops. I've done enough damage and enough distraction as it is. You can see these enemy recruits at the back have already suffered heavy losses, and they actually just suddenly retreat once they come under artillery fire. So we've knocked out one of the enemy's good ranged units. Here their matchlock kachi came back from routing are facing a big charge from all of my spear levy, and now making use of my definitive melee advantage, just charging forwards on all fronts since the enemy's cavalry has been defeated. The remaining troops in the enemy's infantry regiments are just running, and there aren't even that many remaining, because over the course of the last couple of minutes they've been bombarded by mortar fire the entire time. You can see the ground is covered in piles of bodies and holes, so only a couple of hundred of them actually escaped in the end. So a nice, easy, decisive victory for the Sioux forces. The work of our artillery was quite nice, and the AI didn't do very much to get rid of their disadvantage in that respect. So this means the Nagoya clan have failed in their chance to take Umi province, although we do still have the Obama army on the way. From the battle results screen we can see we killed more than twice as many as we lost, but we still lost enough for it to be potentially a problem once the Obama clan gets here. It kind of depends what they bring. A statue is erected in Umi to our victory, so it seems the local people are quite happy about us winning that battle. So I'm going to send the troops all back to the castle, because that slightly boosts their replenishment rate. So over the course of the next turn, they'll get some of their troops back, not all of them though, so we're still going to be in a weakened state by the time the Obama army gets here. I am going to be able to reinforce with extra units from the west though, so that's a slight advantage. Now I thought they might want to have peace with me since I just defeated them in battle. That would mean I can focus on the war against Obama. Unfortunately they weren't up for it even if I threw in a trade deal. So peace was not on the cards. I'm going to have to continue to fight on both my northern and eastern fronts. The Obama army, as expected, moves down, doesn't actually go for Umi Castle. They're going for the mines again. They want to destroy our economy before they attack, just like they did last time. I'm not going to let them do that though for now. So down in Kawachi, I'm now going to rebuild my first cadet school, a move towards modernization. This will allow me to recruit some Western style units. It'll be a while before it's in action, but once I have it, it should provide Takahisa's army with a source of able troops. So as I said, I'm not going to let them attack the mines. I'm going to challenge them to battle right now with the remains of my army from the last battle and reinforcements coming over from defeating those Obama stragglers a while ago. The Obama army isn't that good. It's full of levies. It has 2 units of Shogunate loyalists, light infantry, who outrange my men, but on balance I think I have the advantage. For days marching on the road, we passed shrines where the dead of our allies, the Nagoya clan, were being mourned. In equal measure were offerings to the gods to give thanks for the Sioux victory. A statue of the Sioux lord Todo Takayuki stood at the crossroads where we turned west. The next day, Sioux banners were visible on a distant hill. We formed up to advance in battle array. The ground was speckled with spent cartridges and potted with shell holes, some still bearing the remains of the defeated. As we drew close, the order to double time the advance came, and the rain of imperial fire began. Now this battle is pretty similar to the last one. It's on exactly the same battlefield. This time I deployed further up the hill to my rear, knowing that the enemy would advance towards me, so I wouldn't have to get my artillery right up front. So the enemy are indeed advancing. This time they're advancing at double time right from the beginning. They're running right at me. They have all of their ranged infantry on their front line, unlike the last army, which seemed to think that melee infantry would be the best thing to lead with. So they've got this big wide line of levy infantry. I think their Shogunate loyalists are on both flanks, which is a superb position for those long range units. So I'm going to see how much damage my artillerymen can do to them before they get into firing range. I was trying to focus on the Shogunate loyalist regiments because I knew they would do the most damage to me once the firing started. So now I've gone to range. You can see my matchlocks in the background are starting to unleash fire on them, but it's hardly doing any damage at this extreme range. The enemy is going to fire back, and they're going to have a much better time because my position on the hill actually presents a large target to the enemy, which means the shots that miss my front lines are hitting the back ones. So actually, it wasn't such a good idea to deploy on the hill like this. It gives me the advantage that more of my men will have line of sight simultaneously, but for matchlock militants, they can do that anyway because of their loose formation. So I actually should have deployed further forwards. So at least I've learned a lesson here that was a mistake. Now, because I have numerical superiority, I can actually start outflanking the enemy relatively easily. I've got matchlock militants coming to attack the enemy's levy infantry on their extreme right. I've also got some Naginata levy going around the side who are very similar to spear levy to potentially engage the enemy in melee. See, my guys firing at the flank are pretty much doing no damage whatsoever, but at least it's going to gradually diminish their units. They decided to charge forward with all of their spear levy, so I'm going to meet the charge by ramming forward my own spear levy right into them. I'm hoping that my guys will win out because the enemy have slightly depleted units as a result of running through a hail of matchlock fire. It didn't do all that much, but it will have damaged their morale numbers a little bit. So now an intense melee is going to begin in front of the lines. My guys are firing over the top of my men. Quite useful, so actually that proved to be a good aspect of deploying up the hill. I can still fire at their back lines while my melee lines are engaged. I had my cavalry to the rear of the enemy's formation. Mostly they were just distracting the enemy rather than engaging them because they had too many supporting infantry units pointing at each other for me to attack one. If I'd charged into one, I would have been fired into the rear from others, so I decided to just distract them for now. Meanwhile, on the actual front lines, I am annihilating the enemy's melee infantry and I pretty much won the melee fight. The ranged fight is still contested. I've lost a lot of men, but the enemy have lost even more, especially because my artillery are still pounding them the whole time. You can see these loyalists have lost almost all their troops. These levies have lost quite a lot as well. They're still holding out. But as my artillery starts slamming down into these mass ranks of enemy troops, we start to see routs occurring. Plus I am now advancing my infantry towards them, which will further dampen their morale as the risk of being outflanked for them grows stronger and stronger. I finally attacked with my cavalry, ramming into these levy infantry who won't do very well. They rout as well, realising that they're going to be defeated in this fight. And pretty much overall, a general advance mops up the rest of the enemy's army with relative ease. So we're going to destroy this Obama force as it routs and try and maximize casualties because I don't want a surviving army to roam around damaging my economy again like it did last time. So, a nice decisive victory, very similar to the one we just saw against the Nagoya clan. Again, the artillery really playing a strong role, whilst my big militant and levy ranks weren't doing all that well, but sheer numbers and good positioning allowed them to win out. You can see we lost around 600 troops, the enemy losing around 2,000, a pretty good battle result right there. But now my army, having gone through 2 successive battles in the last 2 turns, is getting quite weak, so it's going to take around 3 to 4 turns to actually get it to full strength again. The good news is that Takayuki has leveled up. He's now level 3. One of the abilities he unlocks at level 3 is the ability to replenish troops at a much faster rate. So that's going to decrease the number of turns required to get back into strength to around 2 or 3. So hopefully after that we can consider going on an offensive against either the Obama or the Nagoya. Now I wanted to see if the Obama would want peace after having been defeated a second time, and they actually did. So this offered an interesting opportunity. They even wanted trade. So I can now get peace to my north and now focus on the Nagoya to the east and invade Mino, make that my next strategic step. So I considered quite carefully whether I actually wanted to do this, because I thought I might be able to exploit the Obama's weakness. They obviously think they're weaker than us. One thing I did ask for is for them to break their alliance with the Nagoya clan, because they were allied against us. So I'm ending that relationship. That should further weaken the Nagoya clan at the same time as strengthening my position by not having to worry about northern attackers.
Enough! Your words are wearisome, but I accept your proposal.
And all goes as planned. But we were winning. Peace now. Father believes so much in wanting to appear different from the other lords that he's prepared to commit folly for it. Now we have told the land that to invade the Sioux domain is without risk, for those who fail are pardoned and left unpunished. I care not if there's even a whit of strategy to this move. The principle is stronger than the practicality. He clearly means to make the Nagoya a clan who did us no insult, but we declared war on them anyway, the ones who'll be punished for the war in Umi. And then the Obama will be a tumor on our domain's exposed flank, ready to destroy us at any time. So with this turn of events in the war with Obama, I can now go straight for Mino. I'm deciding which units I'm going to use to go for that war, leaving a few behind just to control the public order in Umi, leaving some of my weakest ones and my wooden cannons because I wasn't finding them to be all that useful. I'm not going to go right into Mino now because I need another turn of unit replenishment to make sure my units are in proper fighting shape. So I'm going to hang out on the border for now and see what opportunities come my way. I also decided to try and get military access from the Yodo clan at pretty much any cost so that I can bring some troops back from Kawachi. Having them trapped there is not very useful. They're just wasting money for me at the moment. Kawachi is not under threat of attack from any direction. So I give the Yodo massive amounts of military access to my lands in return for a very small amount to theirs, which I'm going to use to move a key part of the army in Kawachi back towards Umi province. It'll take them a couple of turns to get there. The guys behind in Kawachi are required to keep public order under control. If it wasn't for that, I probably would have brought more back. Still, those troops aren't particularly high value. Now we're in the next turn, and it's time to actually consider our attack plan against the Nagoya clan. They control both Mino and Owari. So first I want to decide whether it's worth going for Owari instead of Mino and then doubling back to attack Mino. A bit of a more risky strategy, but Owari is quite useful because it has a particular province building that upgrades the accuracy of your troops, which is vital for recruiting elite armies. Now, in order to attack Owari, I needed to go through the lands of the clan just to the south there. So I wanted to see if they would give me military access, and long story short, they wouldn't at any cost. I thought, okay, I can still go through their lands if I declare war on them. So I had to look at their army, and it's looking pretty damn good. They have mortars, they have light guns, they have elite melee infantry, and they have tons of levy infantry, enough to overwhelm my own matchlock militants. So their army is pretty damn strong. I did not want to pick a fight with them, so instead I decided I'm going to have to just go with the plain old attack on Mino plan. At first I wanted to just edge towards it so I could get as close as I can and see what troops they have. Eventually I see their garrison. It's not particularly large, but it's pretty modern. It looks like it's pretty much the same army that they attacked us with in Umi, the same sort of composition. So I'm going to wait one turn before I attack, because it will allow Takehisa's army, at least his cavalry part, to actually catch up in the next turn. So I'm going to wait for that before I attack, because I'm going to gain a couple of units. The enemy can't possibly recruit that many in the same amount of time. So Takahisa and these 2 units of cavalry are joining up, and I still have enough movement points to go right into the assault. So I attacked, but the big problem was there was another enemy army standing in the fog of war behind it. So as I go into the attack, I see the enemy actually has quite the advantage on me. They have some samurai coming in from the east. The army inside the castle has 2 generals, lots of proper combat infantry, lots of levy infantry as well, who are still going to be quite good defending a castle. So I had to make a very important decision. Do I retreat or do I risk an attack? In the end, I sort of theorized I would be able to make an attack work if I did it a very certain way. So now I'm going to see if that plan works, at least the beginning of it. So here's the enemy force inside their castle. They're defending all sorts of directions, but I'm focusing on the east side, so they're starting to move towards me. My mortars have already begun their bombardment. A key part of my plan is to annihilate all of the enemy defenders with my mortars. The mortars have limited ammunition, but I'm hoping that with what ammunition they do have, they'll be able to do some pretty devastating damage. Now the key part of the plan is me relying on the fact that the enemy's reinforcements are coming from the east. So I've deployed my forces facing east, and sure enough they appear out of the forest. So I'm going to be able to defeat all of the enemy's reinforcements by massively overwhelming them before they can get to the castle. So the enemy won't have any extra defensive advantage for having those extra troops. And all the time I'm fighting them, the enemy's troops are going to be taking fire from my mortars. You can see I'm gradually chipping down at their numbers of troops. What I really need to do is fire at the fort walls rather than the units, because the units on the walls that can fire out as I advance will be the real threats, but we'll get to that another time. Now the enemy's cavalry are charging my militants uphill. Luckily I had some Yarikachi right behind them who can charge down and lock the enemy's Yariki in position. Now my militants can shoot the enemies off their horses, whilst the Yarikachi themselves will have a pretty good time fighting with the horses in melee. So we rout that unit of Yariki pretty easily. So now the enemy's actual foot samurai are on the way. They have 2 units of Yarikashi and 1 unit of archers. The first unit of Yarikashi starts running up the hill towards us, then it very weirdly runs across the face of my line, taking casualties, and then it routs, still with most of its men intact. But they try and rout towards the castle, a fatal mistake because of course they're going right through my ranks. So now my matchlock militants are going to start stopping them, blocking them with their melee attacks and killing off a large number of them. Their other unit of samurai is actually coming around the flank of my formation, so I deployed some spear levy to hold them in place, and I'm going to gradually outflank them with my overwhelming numerical advantage and hit them from all sides. Their morale is going to be severely diminished, so even though they're fighting against spear levy, against which they have an advantage, they're not going to fight for very long. To deal with the enemy's archers, I just moved forward 3 units of matchlock militants. I thought my 3 low quality ranged units can surely take out this 1 high quality ranged unit. So far it's not going all that well. I'm taking pretty heavy casualties from all these arrows that are flying in and hitting my big wide formation. Now I'm starting to fire back, but even at this really close range, the militants' accuracy is so low that they're barely hitting them. We've got literally hundreds of men firing their matchlocks at this 1 line of enemy troops, and we're barely hitting them. Luckily, the very slow casualties we are causing diminishes their morale because they're in such a big problematic situation. I don't really need to kill all of them. So after killing just a few, they rout, and they too are going to rout towards the castle and get themselves killed. So we've pretty much slaughtered the samurai component of the enemy's army outside the castle. So now I need to go into the next phase of the plan, where I actually assault the castle and see how much damage I can do with my mortars, which we'll be seeing next time. So that's all for now. The battle and the war with the Nagoya clan continues next time on Teppou Republic.